Java-Magazin. Ich bin auf der JAX 2014 und bei mir ist Guillaume Laforge. Hi Guillaume.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, hallo. Schön, dass du da bist. Guillaume, you just had your talk. Why is Groovy, or what makes Groovy Groovy?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great start for the interview. So
okay.
What does make Groovy?
So what makes Groovy Groovy? So one of our goals for Groovy that's always been to try to simplify the life of developers, and especially Java developers. So basically, the origins of Groovy are deeply rooted in the Java roots, so even in terms of syntax. But we kind of went sideways to try to simplify here and there, and make it somehow as if we try to make Java more concise, more readable, and also offering nice shortcuts. For example, we had closures since the beginning of the language 10 years ago, when Java 8 only adds them now, so it took a little while to get there. So we're always trying to also simplify certain APIs. For example, if you want to read and parse and create XML or JSON content, etc. We've got some nice APIs, also leveraging the dynamic aspects of the language, which makes it much more concise and readable to express in a much shorter number of lines compared to Java. So it's much less verbose and more readable.
Okay, cool.
So that's what makes it Groovy.
So, and Groovy 2.3 just came out.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the biggest topics of this year is Java 8, the JDK 8. And Groovy now supports it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, when I understand it right, there were some difficulties, and 2.3 is the way to go if you want to support Java 8.
Exactly. So with Java 8, so there are new syntax elements, for example, lambdas, or default methods in interfaces, etc. But also with the default methods on interfaces, for instance, somehow Java now adds new methods to existing types like collections, and we had some conflicts with the ones we added ourselves. So Groovy 2.2 had a few conflicts like that, as well as some more trickier technical aspects, but which don't really impact users. But we prevented Groovy from running fine under certain circumstances. So that's why we had to do some particular changes in the runtime, etc., to make it work on Java 8, on JDK 8. And what's nice as well is that although we didn't add, let's say, the syntax for lambdas, you can very well use the stream API from Groovy, because you can just use Groovy closures instead of lambdas. So it's pretty much transparent for the users. So it's just the syntax, which is the usual Groovy syntax for closures, rather than the lambda syntax. But we really wanted to make sure that that version would be ready for JDK 8 and beyond, because we also build Groovy against the JDK 9 snapshots as well, although it's far from released now.
Yeah, but it's just started, right?
It's just started, yes, exactly.
So what are your highlights of 2.3 like this?
Yeah, so the JDK 8 support, one of the new features that we added is traits. So it's a new object-oriented concept, if you will, compared to just interfaces, classes, etc. We have traits. So it's a bit like interface with default methods, but stateful. So you can have state as well. And you can have your classes implement or extend several traits, and you can do things you would do with the languages which support multiple inheritance, but in a slightly cleaner way. So that's one of the key features. So it's going to be interesting to see how people leverage traits to make their object-oriented design more composable, rather than relying on inheritance with interfaces, etc. So it should make things a bit nicer in terms of object orientation. So traits, that's one thing. We also overhauled our JSON support. So we rewrote the parser as well as the serializer, which makes Groovy's JSON support the fastest on the JVM. So there were some recent articles about that on the web, which was comparing Groovy with Jackson or JSON, and showing that Groovy was really very fast at that. So it's a nice improvement. And nowadays, most web APIs are supporting JSON, so JSON is everywhere, like XML was 10 years ago. So it's nice to have a super fast JSON support. So that's some of the key highlights of the Groovy 2.3 version that we released a couple of weeks ago.
You shared with us the number of downloads last year, which is 3 million.
3 million downloads.
Congratulations! It's really an impressive number.
Yeah.
And it kind of asks the question: what are the use cases for Groovy that makes it that big a number?
Mm-hmm. So there are different use cases for Groovy. So you can use just for scripting tasks on the command line on your computer. So I think it's a small use case, but lots of developers also develop small scripts in Groovy instead of doing some bash script or Ruby or Python, etc. Another use case, we often see Groovy being used for testing. So you don't usually have Groovy in your production code, but people like using Groovy and the frameworks like the Spock testing framework, etc. Using Groovy because the tests are much more concise and readable and easier to maintain. So that's another use case. The third, so you can also build full-blown apps like with Grails or Griffon, etc. Also in scripting, I would add Gradle. The Gradle build automation tool is a big user of Groovy. And the last use case that I quite like is the embedded use case, where you have frameworks, libraries integrating Groovy to provide customization. For example, there's the Smart Things, which is an Internet of Things company. They allow you to write Groovy scripts to have different objects interact with each other. So you may have an event, a trigger, that will trigger a Groovy script and which will call other objects and that kind of stuff. So there are many use cases where you can configure applications with Groovy script. You can extend it with plugins written in Groovy and have the plugins being reloadable live at runtime, that kind of stuff. And an extension of that use case is because of the nice malleable, flexible syntax of Groovy, how you can create domain-specific languages. So you have banks, insurance companies, financial institutions dealing with hedge funds and that kind of things, who are actually writing business rules in Groovy because it looks more like plain English or German or French sentences, or because we use big decimal for arithmetics, for floating point arithmetics by default, and you have more accurate results instead of rounding errors. So yeah, that's a bit of all the use cases that we have, which are quite diverse, I would say, and which brings up to 3 million downloads for last year. Almost double the numbers from the previous year.
Yeah, 1.9.
1.7 in 2012.
Yeah.
So that's I'm pretty proud of what our team achieved. And when I noticed the big figure for last year, I was like, but how is it possible to double again? That was a big surprise.
So what's our next plans? I mean, you can share a roadmap or something, but
yeah.
You sure have a plan and challenges maybe that will come up this year.
Yeah. So we might be doing a 2.4 release before 3.0. 2.4 will add certain of the syntax constructs of Java 8, but we haven't yet decided which. For example, we don't really need lambdas because we have closures, but for example, the method references work slightly differently or allow certain things that the method references in Groovy don't allow. So there are certain things we'll be adding, but well, that might be more for Groovy 3 actually in terms of syntax, but in terms of simplification of the APIs, that will be more for Groovy 2.4. And in Groovy 3, we'll also be rewriting the grammar with a more recent version of the grammar generation tool that we use. So it's not in order to change the grammar, the syntax of Groovy, but just to make life easier for us, developers of the Groovy language. And also the big challenge ahead that we announced years ago, but which is very complicated to do and which will require even more work is the rework of the runtime of Groovy, the dynamic runtime. And one of the challenges we've had so far was that because it's based on the invoked dynamic support from Java 7 and JDK 7, but it wasn't very solid in JDK 7. It's only in the most recent Java 7 updates that the invoked dynamic support is solid.
Oh, okay.
Java 8, JDK 8 is okay, but JDK 7 was even worse in that respect. And we really wanted to make Groovy 3 based on invoked dynamic by default, so only using that rather than other optimization techniques we've used so far. But it wasn't possible because it was too buggy in the JDK. So now, at least that it's mature, we hope to be able to make it for Groovy 3, but it's a pretty complex task. So not so much about using invoked dynamic, but how to rethink all our APIs doing dynamic things in the language, because we built on top of layers across the 10 years of existence of Groovy, and it's not that simple to make things more homogeneous, easy to do, and also address certain concerns we couldn't address before, etc. So it's a bit challenging.
But would the Groovy team work together with the Oracle team to get this done? Are you like sitting together?
Yeah, so we now have continuous integration going with the various JDK snapshots, 7, 8, and 9. And as soon as we notice regression in the JDK, we report back to the JDK team, and we are in discussions with them when we notice such bugs, so that we can follow up and help them fix those bugs, so that the day we really need them, they are addressed for the next versions of the JDK. So yeah, we work a bit hand in hand with them on that.
So all the best for that. And
thank you.
We'll talk again when Groovy 3.0 is
Yeah.
out.
Sure.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.